"Stop the drill," the officer said, stepping past the line, voice carrying over 500 still bodies. "If this is military training, say so now, because it doesn't look like it." Boots froze, rifles stayed down, and the pause made his challenge permanent. What follows was never meant to be verified, some later said, because no report captured it. Those present disagreed on details, yet agreed on the pressure that set in once words landed and could not be retrieved. The officer kept talking. "You're teaching movement without command. You're calling it discipline without formation. My men need structure, not theatre." A ripple moved through the ranks. Someone whispered that rank had just been questioned aloud. Another claimed the moment felt heavier than any order. Bruce Lee faced him and said little. "Observe," the officer scoffed. "Observe what? A crowd impressed by tricks?" He gestured wide. 500 soldiers deserve doctrine." A witness would later insist the sentence sounded like a verdict. Another remembered impatience edging the consonants. Bruce answered, "Proceed." "That's not an answer," the officer pressed. "I asked if this is military." He stepped closer, words stacking. "You don't wear the uniform. You don't speak the language of command. You call this training?" Murmurs rose, reported later as disbelief, curiosity, irritation. Bruce said, "Stand." The officer continued, "This ends now. You answer me." Several soldiers later claimed the air thinned. One said the silence shouted. Another said no one blinked. Bruce looked at the ranks and said, "Watch." The officer snapped, "I won't repeat myself." A voice murmured, "This is public, right now, here." Laughter flickered and died. "Stand for what?" the officer replied, louder now. "For a demonstration? For approval?" He finished where everyone could hear. "If this isn't military, say it. If it is, prove it." "You need to understand who you're standing in front of," the officer said, not lowering his voice. "I've led men in real operations, under real command, where hesitation costs lives." The formation stayed rigid, but attention bent toward him. Those present later said this was where certainty hardened. What followed was never meant to be verified, and accounts conflicted, yet many agreed the officer spoke as if retreat had already vanished. "I trained under systems that don't bend," he continued. "Clear ranks, clear orders, visible authority." Someone in the line murmured that he was listing medals without naming them. Another would later claim the speech sounded rehearsed once it started. Bruce Lee listened. He did not interrupt. "That's discipline," the officer pressed. "Not suggestion, not interpretation." He paced once, slow, deliberate. "You stand here without insignia, without command structure, and you expect soldiers to follow motion?" A soldier later said the word motion sounded like an accusation. Bruce said, "They are watching." "Exactly," the officer replied quickly. "They're watching whether this holds weight." He gestured to the ranks. "These men answer to hierarchy. They need to see who stands above them." Stories say his words multiplied, filling gaps that silence left behind. Bruce did not match him. "They answer to clarity." The officer laughed, sharp. "Clarity comes from rank." He leaned forward. "You can't teach legitimacy without wearing it." Someone whispered that the line had shifted. Another remembered the officer's jaw tightening. Bruce said, "Legitimacy shows." "That's convenient," the officer snapped. "Invisible authority. Unmeasurable results." He turned briefly to the soldiers. "You hear this? This is not doctrine." Later accounts differ on whether heads moved or stayed fixed. Bruce remained still. "Stay." "Stay?" the officer repeated. "Stay and do what?" His voice rose despite himself. "You've put me in front of my men." A witness would later say this was the moment ego locked the door. Bruce said, "Observe." Silence stretched. The officer broke it. "Then understand this," he said, louder now. "I will not step back from this." He faced Bruce fully. "If this is training, you prove it. If it isn't, you admit it." He added, final and public, "There's no other option." The officer did not wait. "You still haven't corrected me," he said. "That tells me everything." He paced once more. "When someone is wrong, you correct them. When someone outranks you, you acknowledge them." Those present later said this was where the imbalance grew. What followed was never meant to be verified, but many recalled how silence began to feel like resistance. Bruce Lee replied, "You're not wrong." The officer stopped. "Then say it clearly." He leaned in. "Say, this isn't military." Bruce said, "I won't." "That's evasion," the officer snapped. "You keep hiding behind brevity." He spoke faster now. "Command requires clarity, definitions, lines." A witness would later claim the words sounded crowded, as if chasing each other. Bruce answered, "Lines are drawn by action." The officer laughed louder than before. "Action without authority is chaos." He turned toward the formation. "You hear this? He won't deny it, but he won't define it." Some soldiers later said they felt pulled between certainty and curiosity. Bruce remained still. "They're listening." "Listening to what?" the officer demanded. "You haven't explained anything." He stepped closer again. "You think silence is strength?" Bruce said, "Sometimes." The officer shook his head. "That's not doctrine. That's mysticism." He gestured sharply. "You're letting my men imagine meaning instead of giving it." Accounts differ on whether a few soldiers shifted their weight. Bruce said, "Meaning appears." The officer's jaw tightened. "You keep speaking like this is a lesson instead of a challenge." His voice edged upward. "I'm standing here, publicly questioning you, and you won't even defend yourself." Bruce replied, "Defense isn't required." That drew a reaction. Someone later claimed a breath was held across the ranks. Another said doubt crossed the officer's face for the first time. "Not required?" the officer repeated. "Then what is this?" He spread his hands. "What are we doing right now?" Bruce said. "You're testing." The officer paused, then spoke again. "No," he said slower. "I'm exposing." He straightened. "And I won't stop until you answer properly." His words landed heavy. Bruce did not respond. The silence lengthened, and attention shifted away from who spoke most to who waited longest. A witness later insisted that impatience crept into his stance, while Bruce's quiet held the space. Someone whispered that control felt misplaced, not seized. No order followed. Only expectation hanging, unanswered and growing heavier by the second for everyone watching there. "You're enjoying this," the officer said, sharper now. "Standing there while I do the work." He took another step, faster than before. "That's not restraint. That's avoidance." Later accounts disagreed on when impatience became visible, but many remembered the pace changing. What followed was never meant to be verified, only felt as certainty began to outrun control. Bruce Lee did not respond immediately. The officer continued, "You think silence makes you untouchable?" His words came quicker. "In my world, silence gets filled." He glanced at the soldiers. "And right now, it's being filled with questions." A witness later claimed, shoulders tightened across the formation. Bruce said, "Questions are useful." "Not in front of 500 men," the officer snapped. "They need answers." He stopped, then moved again, narrowing the distance. "You're forcing me to push this further." Bruce said, "You already are." That line unsettled him. "Don't tell me what I'm doing," he said. "I'm maintaining order." His tone sharpened, each word clipped. "You've turned a demonstration into a standoff." Bruce answered, "You did." Murmurs spread, reported later as surprise rather than approval. Someone said the officer's hand flexed, then dropped. "You're deflecting," the officer said. "You won't engage because you can't." He spoke faster, almost over himself. "If you had something solid, you'd present it." He stepped again, closer. "Instead, you wait," Bruce said. "Timing matters." "Timing?" The officer laughed, but it broke unevenly. "This isn't a performance," he gestured at the ranks. "This is command." A soldier later said the word command sounded thinner than before. Bruce remained where he was. "Command is pressure." The officer frowned. "Pressure comes from authority." He paused, then added, louder, "And authority is visible." Stories differ on whether he realized how close he had come. Bruce said, "So is imbalance." That drew a sharper reaction. "You're implying something," the officer said. "Say it." His voice rose again. "Say what you mean." Bruce did not answer. Silence stretched past comfort. Witnesses later claimed this pause felt longer than any order they'd received. One said posture shifted along the line, not from disobedience but anticipation. The officer filled the gap. You think because you haven't moved, you're in control. He shook his head. Control comes from action. He took another step, quicker than the last. And I'm done waiting. Bruce said, waiting isn't passive. That was when the officer's certainty wavered. Not visibly to all, but enough that a few sensed it. You keep turning this around, he said. You're forcing escalation. Bruce replied, momentum does that. The word hung. No command followed, no demonstration began. The space between them felt narrower than before, and several later insisted that authority no longer seemed anchored to rank, but to who moved next. The officer spoke again, louder, trying to reclaim it, but something had already shifted, and it did not feel reversible. He moved first, the officer said later, but in the moment he spoke now, enough. He stepped in. You've delayed this long enough. The decision was already moving, public and irreversible. What follows was never meant to be verified. Those present later disagreed on sequence, yet many agreed speech stopped here and timing took over. Stand where you are, the officer said. I'm ending this. He advanced again. You don't get to control the pause. Murmurs rose, reported as tension, not fear. Bruce Lee said, proceed. That's permission I don't need, the officer replied. Watch closely, he added to the ranks louder. This is what authority looks like. A witness later claimed confidence carried him forward faster than sense. Bruce did not retreat. Watch, he said. Don't repeat me, the officer snapped. I said stand. He closed the space. You think stillness protects you? Another account claimed a laugh escaped and vanished. Bruce said, stillness reveals. The officer scoffed. Reveal this. He lunged into certainty. Then, in the fraction everyone argues about, his weight arrived where the ground did not. Rhythm broke, and breath left him at once. No one agrees on the movements after. Some say a blur, others say nothing dramatic at all. I lost him, one soldier later claimed. Another insisted, it was over before I understood. Recover, the officer barked, trying to reclaim it. That was nothing. He spoke quickly. Reset. He searched for footing with words. You saw that, right? Bruce said. Again? Don't patronize me, the officer snapped. I slipped. He squared himself. It happens. A witness later said the certainty sounded rehearsed. Bruce waited. I said again, the officer insisted, louder. You don't end this on a misstep. He gestured sharply. This isn't a lesson. Bruce said, it is. The officer's jaw tightened. No, he said. Lessons are controlled. He breathed hard. You don't get to define this. Accounts differ on whether he noticed the quiet. Bruce remained where he was. You felt it. I felt nothing, the officer replied too fast. 8 seconds mean nothing. He faced the soldiers. Discipline remains. He turned back. We continue. Bruce said, you choose. The officer spoke last, pushing through the silence. I choose to finish, he said, louder than before, as if volume could return what timing had taken. A pause followed that nobody counted. You think that proves something? The officer continued. It proves nothing. He pointed at the ground. We resume. A witness later said the ranks felt hollow. Bruce said, not yet. The officer answered immediately. Now. He took another half step and spoke over the quiet. I said now, he repeated. This ends when I say it ends. No one moved. Bruce said, then speak. The officer finished, louder. I'm speaking. His voice carried, searching for grip. Hold position, he added. You will not break formation for this. The silence stayed. The officer spoke again, clipped. We proceed under my command. Remember who leads, he said. Eyes front, now. Move. Eyes front, the officer said again, but the words did not land the way they had before. Hold. He waited for the familiar snap of obedience. It came unevenly. Those present later argued about what followed. What happened next was never meant to be verified, and interpretations split almost immediately. Return to formation, the officer added, quieter now. A few soldiers adjusted. Others stayed fixed, unsure if movement would be correction or mistake. Someone later said the pause felt heavier than the exchange itself. Bruce Lee did not speak. The officer cleared his throat. This demonstration is concluded. He glanced once toward Bruce, then back to the ranks. There was no outcome here. A witness would later say the sentence sounded prepared in advance. Bruce remained silent. "I said there was no outcome," the officer repeated. Sharper. "No lesson, no display." He took a breath. "You all saw a slip, that's all." Some soldiers later claimed they nodded because they were told to, not because they agreed. Bruce did not correct him. A soldier near the back reportedly whispered, "Then why does it feel unfinished?" Another claimed he looked down because eye contact felt inappropriate. The officer spoke again. "Dismiss the idea that anything happened." He paused. "This is discipline." He waited. "Understood." A few voices answered, delayed. Bruce stayed where he was. "That's enough," the officer said, almost to himself. "We move on." He shifted his stance, then added, "You don't explain every moment." He looked at Bruce. "You especially." Bruce said nothing. Stories say this was where confusion took shape. Some insisted the silence meant nothing had occurred. Others described restraint, not victory. A few mentioned something like acknowledgement, but without gestures, without words. The officer folded his hands behind his back. No questions. He scanned the ranks. There will be no discussion. He faced forward. This was not a challenge. His voice lowered. It was a clarification. Bruce remained silent. A witness later said the quiet felt deliberate. Another said it felt unresolved. No one recalled Bruce offering meaning. No one recalled the officer asking for it. "Stand down," the officer said finally. "We proceed as scheduled." He waited again. The formation moved, but not cleanly. Eyes avoided each other. Some later claimed they felt denial pressing against respect, neither winning. Bruce did not move to explain. The officer spoke one last time in that space. "There's nothing to remember," he said. "Carry on." The words echoed thinly. The quiet stayed. Stories say the moment lingered long after the soldiers left, replayed quietly in mess halls, whispered in barracks, and debated in officers' quarters. Some insisted nothing had happened, claiming the confrontation was no more than a misaligned demonstration. Others amplified it, describing restraint where others expected force, timing where others expected spectacle. What followed became debated, and each retelling shaped the tale differently, softening edges for some, sharpening them for others, until the event no longer belonged to a single day or place. Bruce Lee's silence became part of the story itself, remembered more than his words. The officer's certainty was recalled, then questioned, then dismissed, leaving nothing fixed except the memory of tension and the echo of imbalance. Witnesses later said they could never agree on what truly occurred in those 8 seconds, whether dominance had been challenged or merely hinted at, and each account emphasized different fragments that refused finality. Over time, the story detached from rank and audience, transforming into lesson rather than record. Some treated it as proof that restraint could outweigh assertion. Others shrugged, calling it rumor, an anecdote for those who watched closely. Yet everyone who repeated it sensed the same pulse beneath the tale, a rhythm not tied to confirmation but to perception. In this way, the moment survived, not as fact, not as dispute, but as legend, defined precisely by what could not be pinned down, and remembered because certainty failed.